All right. So the next little cultural differences or generational and age differences is language used. This is something that is becoming more and more apparent as I grow into my father role. So I am a father of three, and the words they use, the slang they use, not really sure. I've had to Google a lot of these little terms and realizing that I'm not that cool hip parent that I thought I was. So this can be whether the words that we speak or the words that we are typing or even texting. So that's something that or sending in an email. So that's something that we need to be very aware of as we send out these communications. So is the audience who's going to receive the message that I'm trying to send going to be able to interpret and understand the message that I'm trying to convey? So if I say something is, hey, this is a priority, we need to make sure that this task is completed in a timely manner, you have these tasks to complete, and it needs to be done by the end of the day. Pretty clear message. But if I were to send an email with abbreviations that said FYI and a bunch of acronyms that only a company of, let's say, senior representatives understood, and we had a new employee read this email, would they understand? Probably not. They would say, okay, I don't know what GDP is, I don't know what this is, or whatever it may be. So you need to be really aware of the words being used in these formal and informal messages that we're using. The slang is something that needs to be understood as well. Try to limit it, especially when you're having those professional conversations, especially when you are introducing yourself into a group or a diverse workplace. Let's think about the last time you read a message that you weren't really sure if you read it correctly or what the message that you really wanted to understand was. So think about how that's being used, how that could work against you or how it could work with you. Think about now to the next is the tools used. What tools are you using to work on your communication? So one of the common tools that, as previously stated, is going to be emails. Are we using telephone lines? The new generation, I see that using one of these to call one of these is not the norm now. It is becoming more and more of a text message situation or social media platform or anything of that sort. So as opposed to an older generation, maybe their form of communication that works best for them is picking up that phone. So that can go back to think about how many people you know that have a landline. Maybe someone in their 20s, they're, what's a landline? Or a rotary phone, anything of that sort. So they may be comfortable thinking about how their message is conveyed with the tools they're used. In this next little topic is experience. What experience do people have? Someone with an older generation may have a lot more experience than us and may be able to provide different scenarios and experiences that you may not have seen that can help you work through an obstacle. So that is something that should not be taken for granted. Work experience, leadership experience is something that is invaluable. That can only be done with time. So using those resources to visualize and you get that previous knowledge of scenarios. How did they work through it? How did they get the job done? Maybe these are ideas that failed in past times, but are now something that we have the capability, we have the new resources that could be effective today. Work ethic. Now, work ethic is something that could either be, this is a tough one because I currently employ about 20 people and all different walks of life and ages and everything that we spoke of earlier. What is work ethic? Different generations feel that other generations may not work as hard as them. So some people may say that older generations tend to work harder, newer generations try to find an easier approach. But those different approaches can sometimes meet to get a goal to get the job done. So that's something that needs to be done. Are you a hard worker? Are you a smart worker? Are you looking for an easier path? How do we get that accomplished within our goal today? Our market needs as many ideas as possible to be successful. This next slide that I have on page 8 is going to be just a quick little picture of a generational difference. So just take a second to look at this picture. The visual will provide a generational gap, if you will. So the gentleman on the left has a briefcase and maybe, let's just say, some kind of a notebook. Maybe that's his comfort zone. That's something that he may need to do. He's comfortable in silence. This newer generation has the headphones in because we constantly need some kind of source of stimulation, is comfortable with electronics, may take all of his notes on that little iPad or big cell phone there, and maybe has a wallet in his hand or anything of that sort. So this is something that kind of illustrates the generational context that we may have in workplace diversity. They could be walking into the same building, they're both wearing ties, but how they do their work may differ. Moving on to the next slide is respecting and accepting. Now, the biggest thing that I'd like for everyone to understand is that workplace diversity, the foundation of a successful operation, is to respect and accept. Respect everyone with the respect you expect to receive. If someone's rude to you, why were they rude to you? Were you rude to them? And that sometimes takes a lot of self-reflection. Were I accepting of their ideas? Did they maybe misinterpret a message that I sent? And how can we overcome those? So how do we do that? We have to find a common ground. There's not a person in the world that you can't find a common ground with. Well, there probably is, but it should be limited. So that's going to take a lot of trial and error. So, hey, have you ever done XYZ? Did you ever play sports? Do you have brothers or sisters? Find something to break those stereotypes, to find a commonality and build from there. Build that rapport. You can get really acquainted with people the more that you find commonalities, and then you can discover if you truly can engage and work well with this person, and then discover those differences also. Accept them, be open, be receptive, and that can help you communicate effectively. So the more you learn about someone, the more you understand how they communicate. But the more you learn about them, you can understand the words they use. Are they going to convey this message in a way that I intended them to understand it? Do I have to explain it to them? Or do they understand the situation or the scenario that I'm talking about? So the more you communicate, the more you guys can work together. Identifying and defining existing issues. So in order for this to work in our new company, we have to identify what are our current problems. Now, there could be problems from just workflow processes. We all have the same goal, but we have a different idea of how to get to that goal. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's just a lot of ideas. So we need to really make sure that our goal is really structured, so we understand that our goal is something that we're all focused on, and what is the best way to get there. How are we communicating? Are we communicating too much? Are we having meetings that's taken away from us working effectively? Sometimes, and we've seen this meme, this meeting could have been done in an email. Think about the time being used. Think about how you're communicating what needs to be communicated. Are we communicating too little? Too much? Is our goal clear? How can we expect our team to feel really worthy or empowered by our company if we're not listening to them? And we need to be making sure that we do so the best possible way. So how does it look from the outside looking in? Make sure that you are really using these resources to identify what can be your problem. What are you doing about those problems? And when you are taking in these problems, make sure that you're not just listening, but you find a way to take action. Holding everyone accountable for the same thing is a part of being consistent. Without consistency, you can lose your team your workplace diversity can collapse on itself. The environment will no longer feel trustworthy, but it will just kind of feel not like a stable foundation. So make sure that if you do something wrong, own up to it and really evaluate the goals that you were meant to have, the mistakes that you did have, and learn from it. It doesn't mean that you're a failure, it just means that there was a mistake made. Passing the blame does not do anyone any favors and is only a temporary solution. So learn from those mistakes, learn to work together, and find a way to work with everyone in the workplace. Remember, use these resources, use these experiences, this knowledge, and this framework to help everyone be successful. Thank you guys for your time. This is once again Manuel Garcia doing his presentation on workplace diversity. Thank you.